Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Friday, January 23rd, 2026. And I have to be honest with you and with our listeners. Usually when I sit down to prep for this, I'm looking for a narrative, you know.
You're looking for the signal and the noise.
Exactly. I'm looking for that one big story that sort of defines the week. A tech breakthrough, a scandalous election, maybe a market crash. Something that ties it all together.
The through line.
The through line, yeah. But this week, I opened the Global Strategic Assessment covering the last 7 days, and I didn't find a signal. I can only describe it as a cacophony.
No.
It feels like the world didn't just spin faster this week. It feels like the gyroscope actually fell off the axis.
That is, that's honestly not a bad way to describe it. I've been reading through the same stack, the defense briefings, the economic reports, the tech white papers, and the term that kept jumping out at me from the analysts is polyconflict.
Polyconflict. That sounds very clinical. It sounds very sterile for what feels like pure chaos.
It does, but it's trying to get at the core of the problem. It's the convergence. That's the key here. We aren't dealing with isolated incidents.
Right.
We have a major kinetic military intervention in South America. We have what looks like the complete collapse of a regional power in the Middle East. And then at the same time, we have this technological arms race in artificial intelligence that is completely rewriting the economic rulebook.
And they're not taking turns.
They're not taking turns. They are all peaking right now. This week.
It's everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly disorienting. I mean, we've got the U.S. reasserting itself in Venezuela in a way that, frankly, I didn't think happened anymore, not outside of, Tom Clancy novel.
Right.
Then you have Iran in what reports are calling a Proto-Revolution. And then completely separate from the bombs and the bullets, you have this massive fundamental split in the AI world between American brute force and Chinese efficiency.
And if there is a thread, if you want to find that narrative you were looking for, I think it's the snapping of the post-Cold War consensus. For about 30 years, we operated under a set of, let's call them polite fictions, about sovereignty, about how wars are fought, about how technology is shared and developed.
Sure, rules of the road.
Exactly. And this week, those rules didn't just bend, they evaporated. We are watching in real time a profound reordering of the global operating environment.
And nothing screams new rules, quite like the phrase that just dominated the headlines this week. It's a term that it sounds like a joke until you realize people are dead because of it. The Donroe Doctrine.
The Donroe Doctrine. It's catchy, isn't it? It has a ring to it. But the implications are incredibly heavy.
It's this weird mashup of Donald and the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah.
But before we even get into the clever naming, we have to talk about what actually went down on the ground. Because this wasn't a policy speech, this was a raid. So let's start there. Segment 1. The Venezuelan intervention, or as the Pentagon is officially calling it, Operation Absolute Resolve.
This is the headline event, no question. On January 3rd, the United States launched a military operation in Venezuela. But we need to be incredibly precise about the nature of this operation because the details really, really matter.
Right, because when I first saw the alerts pop up on my phone, my first thought was, okay, is this an invasion? Is this D-Day in the Caribbean? But all the sources are very clear.
Yeah.
No, this wasn't tanks rolling across the border.
No, absolutely not. If you send tanks, you own the land. If you send tanks, you are an occupier and you're stuck there. The phrase used in the assessment, the one that tells you everything, is decapitation and extraction.
Decapitation and extraction.
The objective wasn't to defeat the Venezuelan army in the field.
Yeah.
It wasn't to take and hold territory. The objective was singular. Remove the leadership node, specifically Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores.
But the scale of it. I mean, the report says a strike package of over 150 aircraft. That sounds like a war. If 150 planes fly over my house, I'm calling it a war.
It is massive, yes. But you have to look at the composition of that force. It wasn't just bombers dropping payload. Not at all. A huge portion of that, likely the majority, was unmanned systems, electronic warfare assets, and surveillance platforms.
So a lot of it was invisible.
The intelligence preparation here was the real weapon. They used stealth ISR platforms.
And ISR is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
Correct. We're likely talking about the successors to the RQ-170 Sentinel, the Beast of Kandahar, as it was nicknamed.
Right.
These are stealth drones that can loiter for days, completely undetected. And with those, they build what's called a pattern of life analysis on the targets.
Pattern of life. That phrase always gives me the chills. It's so clinical.
It should. It means they weren't just looking for a building. They weren't just looking at Fortuna on a map. They were watching the individuals inside it. They knew what time Maduro woke up. They knew what hallway he walked down to get his coffee. They knew who he spoke to on a secure phone. They built a predictive model of his existence. It's like they had a ghost walking next to him for weeks.
So they watch him, they learn him, and then, when the moment is right, boom.
Not just boom. Blindness. That's always the first step in modern warfare.
Yeah.
The U.S. used advanced electronic warfare assets. We're talking planes like the EA-18G Growler to essentially hack the local air defense networks.
They didn't blow up the radar sites.
No, because blowing things up warns people. It creates panic. They spoofed them. They fed false signals into the Venezuelan radar systems, making the screens show clear, empty skies while a fleet of transport aircraft flew deep into contested airspace.
That is a terrifying capability. So the Venezuelan generals are sitting in a command center, looking at their screens, seeing nothing, while Delta Force is literally landing on their front lawn.
Effectively, yes. The kinetic strikes were surgical, and they were mostly for distraction and containment. They hit key nodes at Fortuna, La Carlota Air Base, and the port at La Guaira. The goal was to cut the communication lines so the body couldn't talk to the head.
Create chaos.
Precisely. And while that chaos was happening, while everyone was trying to figure out what was exploding, elite Tier 1 operators, we're talking Delta Force, physically apprehended the targets.
They just grabbed them. It still sounds insane to say it out loud. They flew into a sovereign country, grabbed the sitting president and the first lady, and just flew them out.
And according to the official U.S. statement, they did it with 0 casualties on their side.
Which is just miraculous, given the complexity of an operation like that.
It demonstrates a total and complete overmatch in capability. It wasn't a fair fight, but we shouldn't pretend it was bloodless. The report notes, and this is important, that Cuba has since acknowledged losing 32 combatants.
Right. I wanted to ask about that. What were Cuban troops doing defending Venezuelan government assets?
This has been an open secret for a decade. Cuban security forces, their intelligence officers, effectively run the Praetorian Guard for the Venezuelan regime. Trust, or lack thereof. Maduro didn't trust his own generals not to turn on him. So he outsourced his personal security and counterintelligence to the Cubans, who had a vested interest in keeping his regime afloat.
So when the U.S. operators breached the perimeter, the people shooting back weren't Venezuelan conscripts.
They were Cuban professionals, highly trained. And they lost. Badly.
So Maduro is in U.S. custody. He's sitting in a cell in Guantanamo or somewhere. But this brings us back to the Donroe Doctrine. How on earth do you justify this legally? I mean, I'm not an international lawyer, but I'm pretty sure you can't just kidnap a foreign head of state.
Under the traditional post-World War II framework. No, absolutely not. It's a flagrant violation of sovereignty. It's the kind of thing that starts world wars. But this is where the Donroe aspect comes in. The administration is making a very specific and very controversial argument. They're arguing that this wasn't a war.
How is a force of 150 planes dropping bombs and extracting a head of state not a war?
They are classifying it as a law enforcement action.
A law enforcement action.
Like,
yeah, a drug bust.
Exactly like a drug bust. Just with F-35s and stealth drones. You have to remember, Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores were under indictment in the Southern District of New York for narco-terrorism. There was a multi-million-dollar bounty on their heads from the State Department.
Okay, so the argument is, we aren't invading a sovereign country, we are serving a warrant on a fugitive.
Precisely. And that distinction, that specific choice of words, is absolutely critical for the domestic legal fight happening in the U.S. right now.
Because of the War Powers Act.
Exactly. The War Powers Resolution requires the president to get congressional authorization to commit U.S. forces to a war for more than 60 days. But if it's just a police action to arrest a known criminal, the executive branch argues they have broad Article 2 powers to act unilaterally to protect the nation from criminals and terrorists.
That feels like a massive loophole. A loophole you could fly a carrier strike group through.
It's a canyon-sized loophole. And you have Secretary of State Marco Rubio going on all the Sunday shows making exactly this case. He's saying, look, there is no permanent occupation. We aren't governing Venezuela. We went in, we got the bad guy, we left. Mission accomplished.
But Congress isn't buying that. Not all of them, anyway.
Not everyone. You have critics, like Representative Raja Krishnamurthy, who are mentioned in the report. His argument is simple. You broke the government. You can't just say, not it. regarding what happens next.
You break it, you buy it rule.
The Pottery Barn rule, yeah.
Yeah.
If you decapitate a state, you own the chaos that follows. That implies an open-ended responsibility which requires legislative assent. You are, whether you admit it or not, committing to run the country.
And that leads us to the what happens next part, because this is the twist in the story that I think really threw everyone for a loop. If you take out the dictator, the assumption, the Hollywood assumption, and frankly the Democratic assumption, is that you install the good guys.
Right.
You bring in the opposition leader who actually won the last election.
Hey.
The person with the Democratic mandate.
That would be the promotion of democracy playbook. That was the George W. Bush era doctrine. That was the hope in the Obama era. That is explicitly not the Donroe Doctrine.
No, it is not. The U.S. did not hand the keys to the Miraflores Palace to Maria Corina Machado, and she just won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work. She has the votes. She has the legitimacy.
She has the moral high ground. She is, by any objective measure, the rightful leader. But the Trump administration made a calculation. They decided she wasn't viable.
Not viable? What does that even mean? She won.
It means she represents a total system reset. If you put Maria Corina Machado in power, she has to dismantle the entire Chavista state apparatus. She has to fire the generals, purge the judges, prosecute 2 decades of corruption.
Which sounds like a good thing.
It sounds like justice. But to a foreign policy realist, it also sounds like instability. It sounds like potential civil conflict. The U.S. administration looked at that map, looked at the risks, and said, we don't want a civil war. We don't want a democratic crusade. We want oil.
So they chose the oil over the democracy.
Explicitly. They prioritize stability and access to resources. And to get that stability, they did something that feels like a profound betrayal to the entire democratic movement in Venezuela. They cut a deal with the regime's number 2.
Elsie Rodriguez.
The former vice president, and her brother, Jorge Rodriguez, who ran the National Assembly. These are the pillars of the very regime the U.S. just attacked, the architects of the repression.
It is just wild.
Yep.
So we arrest the boss for being a criminal, and then we turn to the underboss, high-five them, and say, you're in charge now, just keep the product flowing.
That appears to be exactly what happened. The intelligence brief indicates there was a secret back channel running for months, facilitated by Qatari intermediaries. Delcy and Jorge essentially signaled to Washington, look, Maduro is a problem for you. He's also a problem for us. He's erratic. He's unstable. If he goes and you let us stay, we will give you what you actually want.
Which is the oil.
Maduro goes, we stay, you get the oil. That was the deal on the table.
I want to pause on that for a second. Because the betrayal of Machado and her movement, that has to resonate globally. If I'm a pro-democracy activist in Hong Kong or Belarus or Iran, and I see this, I see the United States sell out the Nobel Peace Prize winner for a barrel of crude oil, what message does that send me?
It tells you that American support is transactional. It tells you that values are nice, but interests are paramount. It's a devastating message for the global human rights community. Machado is sidelined. Her running mate, Edmundo Gonzalez, is sidelined. They are out in the press calling it a coup from within, sanctioned and enabled by the White House.
So let's look at the interest side of that equation then. The oil. The source mentions a 50 million barrel agreement. Is that as straightforward as it sounds?
Yes. On January 20th, this was formalized. It's a swap, oil for survival. The U.S. Treasury transferred an initial tranche of $300 million to the new Rodriguez administration.
Just cash.
Effectively, it's liquidity to keep the state from collapsing, to pay the soldiers so they don't mutiny, to keep the lights on in Caracas. In return, Delcy Rodriguez gave a speech proposing total access for U.S. oil majors like Chevron and ExxonMobil to come back in.
But wait a minute. I've read about Venezuelan oil. It's not like Saudi oil where you just stick a straw in the ground and light, sweet crude comes gushing out.
Yeah.
This stuff is difficult.
Yeah, correct. And this is where the grand deal might smash into the hard wall of reality. Venezuelan crude is extra heavy and sour. It's basically tar. It's sludge.
And sour means it has a high sulfur content.
Very high sulfur content. You can't just put that in a car. You need incredibly complex, specialized refineries to process it, the kind you find on the U.S. Gulf Coast, actually. But even to get it out of the ground and through a pipeline, you need to mix it with diluents lighter fluids like naphtha, just to make it flow.
And does Venezuela have those diluents?
No, they used to import them. But years of sanctions and catastrophic mismanagement stopped all that. The state oil company, PDVSA, has been hollowed out. It's a shell. Their production crashed from 3.2 million barrels a day back in 2000 to barely 1 million today on a good day.
So the infrastructure is shot.
The pipes are rusted through, the pumps are broken, the most talented engineers fled to Houston and Madrid and Calgary years ago. The whole system is decayed.
So the U.S. is betting on a horse with a broken leg.
They are betting that Chevron and Exxon can come in and fix the leg, but that takes billions of dollars and years of work, and $300 million. In a collapsed state the size of Venezuela, that brings up in a week. So the economic skepticism in the report is very, very high. This isn't a magic fix for global oil prices.
And the neighbors must be absolutely furious.
Furious is an understatement. You look at the leadership in Latin America right now, Lula in Brazil, Petro in Colombia, Boric in Chile. These are left-leaning leaders. They look at this and see their absolute worst nightmare coming true.
I saw the quote from Boric in Chile. Today it is Venezuela, tomorrow it can be anyone.
That's the fear. It revives the ghost of the 20th century. Pinochet in Chile, the Contras in Nicaragua, the CIA coups. The idea that if the U.S. can just decide on its own, we don't like your president, we're coming to get him, then national sovereignty is a complete myth.
And what about the other superpower in the room? China. They had huge loans out to Venezuela. They basically owned a lot of their oil.
China is playing a very long, very quiet game of 4D chess here. They aren't screaming and yelling at the UN. They are watching. They are studying. They view this as a stress test for gray zone tactics.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, think about it from Beijing's perspective. They are looking at Taiwan. They are thinking, okay, the United States just proved that you can conduct a surgical decapitation strike against a sovereign leader, and the world didn't end. No nukes were fired. The markets freaked out for a day and then adjusted.
So they're thinking, we could do that.
They are thinking that the precedent has been set.
Yeah.
If law enforcement action against an individual is now a valid excuse for regime change, that's a very powerful tool that Beijing might want to put in its own toolbox someday.
That is a chilling thought. Okay, so that's the Western Hemisphere. Utter turmoil. But the poly-conflict theory says we have to look east. Because while the U.S. is securing oil in Venezuela, the Middle East is just burning. Segment 2. The Iranian Proto-Revolution.
Iran. This is the story that would be, number one, dominating every headline in any other week.
The language here has shifted dramatically. A few years ago, we talked about the Masa Amini protests. Now the sources, the intelligence reports, are all using the term Proto-Revolution. What is the difference? What does that shift signify?
The difference is the goal and the means. A protest wants reform from the existing system. A revolution wants the complete replacement of that system. And proto implies that it hasn't succeeded yet, but the fundamental mechanics of the state are breaking down.
And the trigger this time wasn't a social issue like the headscarf. It was purely economic.
It was the currency, the Iranian rial. In mid-January, it hit what economists are calling functional zero.
What does functional zero actually mean for a normal person on the street? I go to the store, buy milk. What happens?
It means the shopkeeper won't take your cash. He can't. The numbers printed on the bill are meaningless because inflation is moving so fast, hundreds of % per day, that by the time he takes that cash to the bank, it's worth half as much. So the official economy just stops. It seizes up. It reverts to a barter system.
Barter? Like, I'll give you a chicken for a pair of shoes.
Literally. Or, I have this gold jewelry, give me a bag of rice. When a modern, complex economy reverts to the Middle Ages, the social contract is fundamentally broken. You can't pay the police. You can't pay the garbage collectors. The state ceases to function.
And that's what led to the defection of the merchant class.
The Bazaris, the merchants of the Grand Bazaar in Tehran. Historically, they are the kingmakers in Iran. They have immense economic power and social influence. They supported the 1979 revolution that brought the Ayatollahs to power.
And now?
In late December, they shuttered the bazaar. They went on strike. That was the signal. That was the moment everyone was waiting for. They have aligned their survival with the street, not with the state.
And the state's response has been brutal. The numbers we're seeing are staggering: 5,000 dead, 27,000 arrests.
It's an execution wave. The regime is terrified and lashing out. But unlike 2009 or 2022, the people aren't just marching peacefully anymore. That phase is over. In provinces like Fars and Kurdistan, the report details that protesters are raiding military and police armories. They are using lethal force.
They're shooting it back.
They are shooting back. They are organized now. They are ambushing Basi militia members. It's gotten so bad that the justice minister is now officially calling protesters combatants in legal proceedings.
And that's a specific legal term.
It's a term that justifies summary execution on the spot with no trial. This has moved beyond protests. This is an internal war.
And the U.S. isn't just watching from the sidelines. The report says, we moved the armada.
The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, a floating American city with its own air force. It transited the Strait of Malacca and is now headed for the Indian Ocean, within striking distance of Iran. But here's the detail from the defense brief that really matters. They did it under strict MNCON.
Emissions control.
Going dark, turning off all radar, all radio, all AIS beacons that would show up on commercial tracking sites. You don't do that for a photo op. You don't do that for presence. You do that when you are preparing a firing solution and you don't want the enemy to see you coming.
And it's not just the carrier. The report mentions Ohio-class submarines as well.
The SSGNs. These are the 4 Ohio-class subs that were converted from carrying ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads. Instead of nukes, they now carry 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles each.
154. From a single silent submarine. That's a lot of precision damage.
It's a kick-down-the-door weapon. It's a strategic asset. If the Iranian regime, in its death throes, decides to lash out, say, by trying to mine the Strait of Hormuz to distract from their domestic problems, a single SSGN can wipe out their entire coastal navy and air defense sites in about 20 minutes. It's a silent, invisible gun held to Iran's head.
And we're putting shields up too, right? The Patriot batteries in Jordan.
That's right. C-17 cargo planes have been flying around the clock delivering Patriot missile defense batteries to Mafraq al-Khawaja Air Base in Jordan. We are hardening the defenses of our allies, Jordan, Israel, Saudi Arabia, because we expect that if Tehran falls, it might try to take the region down with it in a final volley of ballistic missiles.
It's an absolute powder cake. And there's an information war happening on top of all of this. I saw the note about the satellite hack.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
The Badr satellite platform breach. This is fascinating. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah, the main exiled opposition leader, has been rallying support for years. His network of hackers and activists managed to breach the state TV feed.
So you're sitting in your apartment in Tehran, you're turning on the TV waiting for the supreme leader to give a speech, and...
And the screen cuts to the pre-revolutionary flag of Iran and a recorded message from Pahlavi calling for a national revolution. It completely destroys the regime's aura of invincibility. If they can't even control the pixels on their own state television, how can they claim to control the streets?
So we had the U.S. physically intervening in South America. We have the U.S. parking a massive fleet off the coast of a collapsing Iran. It really feels like the hard power of the 20th century is back in fashion.
It is. But, and this is probably the biggest but of our entire deep dive today, while all that kinetic, explosive, headline-grabbing stuff is happening, there is a third conflict, a quiet war. A war fought in air-conditioned server rooms and on GitHub code repositories. And in the long run, this is the one that matters more than who runs Venezuela or Iran.
Segment 3, the AI inflection point, the inference wars.
This is where the future is being drafted. Right now. And the source material this week describes a massive fundamental divergence in how the world's 2 biggest powers are building it.
Before we get into the U.S. versus China split, we really need to clear up some jargon. The report keeps saying the industry is moving from the training era to the inference era. I think for a lot of people, AI is just, AI. What is the actual difference?
It's a great question. Think of it like this. Medical school versus performing surgery. Training is the process of teaching the AI. It's when you force-feed it the entire internet, all of Wikipedia, every book ever digitized. It learns patterns, language, concepts. That takes months and massive supercomputers. It's like the years a student spends in the library, just reading.
Okay, that makes sense.
Inference is when that student graduates and becomes a doctor and walks into the ER. It's the application of all that knowledge. When you go to ChatGPT and ask it a question and it gives you an answer, that act of thinking and generating a result is inference.
So for the last few years, the big race was to build the best schools, the biggest training supercomputers. Now the race is to build the most efficient hospitals. inference factories.
Exactly. And the scale of demand for inference is exploding because now we don't just want to ask the AI a question. We want it to do work for us 247. And this is where the US and China are taking two completely different, almost philosophically opposed paths.
Let's start with strategy A, the American path, the inference factory.
This is perfectly exemplified by the deal that was announced this week between OpenAI and a company called Cerebras, a massive $10 billion partnership.
Cerebras, they're the ones making that dinner wafer chip.
Wafer Scale Engine 3, the WSE3, yes.
I love that image. But explain why a single chip the size of a dinner plate is such a breakthrough. Usually in computers, we want the chips to be as small as possible.
We do, but here's the physics problem that has plagued AI. It's called the memory wall. If you take a standard NVIDIA chip, it's about the size of a postage stamp. To build an AI supercomputer, you need thousands of them, all wired together in huge racks.
Right.
Well, data has to travel down those physical wires from one chip to another, and believe it or not, at the scale of trillions of calculations per second, the speed of light is actually too slow.
The speed of light is the bottleneck.
It's the ultimate bottleneck. The time it takes for a signal to move from one chip to another creates latency. It's a traffic jam on the information superhighway. Cerebras' founders looked at this and said, screw the wires, let's just make one giant monolithic chip.
So the whole brain fits on one single piece of silicon.
Exactly. It eliminates the commute time for the data. The result is a memory bandwidth of 21 petabytes per second. That is a number so astronomically large, it's almost meaningless to our human brains.
Try to make it meaningful. What does that feel like to me as a user?
It means instantaneous thought. You know when you use a chatbot now, and you see the cursor blinking, or you see the words streaming out one by one like it's typing?
Yeah, of course.
That's latency. That's the model thinking. With this new Cerebras system, the time to first token, the time it takes to start generating a complex answer drops to under 300 milliseconds. That is literally faster than you can blink. You ask a complex, multi-step reasoning question, and the answer is just there. It's a phase shift in performance.
But there's a cost. And I'm not just talking about the $10 billion.
The cost is energy. The American strategy is pure brute force. This one project, this one inference factory, requires 750 megawatts of dedicated power.
750 megawatts. That's a nuclear reactor.
It is literally the output of a standard nuclear power plant. It's enough electricity to power 600,000 homes. The U.S. approach is basically, we have the energy, we have the money, we will build the biggest, fastest, most powerful muscle car on the road, and damn the fuel efficiency.
Which brings us to strategy B, the Chinese path, DeepSeek.
DeepSeek is taking a completely different philosophy. They aren't building muscle cars. They are building hyper-efficient Formula One style hybrids.
Their new models, DeepSeek V4 and R1, the report says they are focusing on software architecture rather than raw hardware size.
Because they have to. You have to remember, U.S. sanctions block China from buying the very best chips from NVIDIA or getting them made at TSMC. So they can't just brute force it. They had to get smarter. They had to innovate on the software side.
So what do?
They introduced two key innovations. The first is something called enneagram memory.
Enneagram? That sounds like something out of science fiction.
It's a biological term, actually. It refers to the physical trace of how a memory is stored in the brain. In AI terms, instead of keeping every single piece of data active in the model's memory all the time, which takes huge amounts of power, they found a way to compress the data into key values. They optimize what the model needs to remember at any given second.
So it's like, instead of carrying the entire library around on your back all day, you just have a really, really good index card system.
That's a fantastic analogy, yes. And they combine that with something called manifold constrained hyperconnections.
Okay, you're definitely making that one up.
I wish I were. It's a mouthful. But think of it like this. In a normal neural network, every neuron is potentially talking to every other neuron. It's a chaotic, energy-intensive mess. Manifold constrained is a software technique that forces the data to take specific optimized highways through the network. It cuts out all the noise and the useless crosstalk.
And what's the result? Who is winning? The American muscle car or the Chinese hybrid?
It's a split decision, and this is the part that is so critical for the future. The benchmarks that came out this week show that OpenAI's brute force approach, running on the new hardware, wins on abstract reasoning.
Meaning?
If you want to write a poem in the style of Shakespeare or discuss the ethical philosophy of Kant, the American model is smarter, more nuanced.
There's a but.
But DeepSeek wins on math and coding. And here's the kicker. It is significantly cheaper to run. I mean, orders of magnitude cheaper. It's more efficient.
So if I'm a business and I don't need a philosopher, I need an AI to write code for my new software product.
You choose the Chinese model every single time. Why pay $10 for the philosopher when you can pay 10 cents for the world's best coder? This creates a massive economic incentive for the world to adopt China's AI architecture.
And that leads to the big so what here. Because we aren't just talking about chatbots that can write poems anymore. We are talking about agentic AI.
Agents. This is the scary shift. This is the inflection point. We are moving from AI that talks to AI that does. An agent is an AI that can take actions, make plans, and operate autonomously to achieve a goal.
And the benchmark they used to test this out this week was Pokemon.
Yes. On Twitch, the live streaming platform, AI agents playing the video game Pokemon from start to finish without any human help. Now that sounds silly and trivial.
It does a little, yeah.
But think about what playing a game like Pokemon actually requires. You have to navigate a complex map. You have to manage resources like money and potions. You have to build a team, make strategic choices, and plan ahead for difficult battles. You have to react to surprises and setbacks.
It's a complex, multi-step planning system.
It is a proxy for the real world. If an AI can beat Pokemon independently, it can navigate your email inbox. It can manage your calendar and schedule your meetings. It can negotiate a supply chain contract with a vendor. It can do your job.
And that leads directly to the warning that came out of the IMF meeting in Davos.
A very, very stark warning. They released a report estimating that 60% of all jobs in advanced economies are at risk of being impacted by AI. But the part of the report that really got me, the part that kept me up at night, was the section on the lost generation of junior employees.
This is something I worry about. I have a niece who is graduating from college next year.
Well, think about how you and I learned our jobs. We started at the bottom, we did the grunt work, you summarized the long reports, you formatted the PowerPoint slides, you debugged the basic lines of code.
Right. The boring stuff that teaches you the fundamentals.
That is exactly what agentic AI does perfectly, instantly, and for free. So companies are going to stop hiring junior analysts, junior coders, junior marketers. Why pay a 22-year-old a salary to make mistakes and learn slowly when the AI can do all that entry-level cognitive work flawlessly?
But if you don't hire the juniors, where do the senior managers and the experts come from in 10 or 15 years?
That's the question. You are sawing off the bottom rungs of the career ladder. We are facing a future where the concept of an entry-level white-collar job simply ceases to exist. It's a structural crisis for the entire workforce.
God, that's heavy. We've got the U.S. seizing oil, Iran on fire, and now AI eliminating the concept of a first job. I feel like we need a break from all the doom. Let's look at segment 4. Frontiers of science, space, and medicine. Although, looking at my notes here, it seems even space isn't safe this week.
No, the theme of fragility extends all the way to low Earth orbit. We had a major and very quiet incident on the ISS.
The International Space Station. This really didn't get enough press coverage, did it?
It really didn't. On January 7th, the SpaceX Crew 11 capsule had to make an emergency undocking and return to Earth. A medical emergency on board.
Do we know what happened to the astronaut?
No, patient confidentiality is very strict at NASA, but it was severe enough that they scrubbed a planned spacewalk and initiated an immediate emergency descent. They splashed down off the coast of California. The detail that stood out in the report was that they were using a portable ultrasound scanner on the astronaut during the high-G re-entry.
Imagine that. You're pulling 4 Gs, burning through the atmosphere at 17,000 miles an hour, and you're trying to do a medical scan on a colleague.
It just highlights how incredibly vulnerable we are up there. The ISS is now down to a skeleton crew of 3. It's a stark reminder that our foothold in space is tenuous. And it raises a terrifying question for the future Mars missions.
Right, because if that happens halfway to Mars...
You don't evacuate, there's nowhere to go, you just die.
Speaking of Mars, we lost a satellite there too. Maven went silent.
The MAVEN orbiter. It's one of the key communication relays. The rovers on the ground, Perseverance, Curiosity, they have relatively small transmitters. They can't easily shout all the way to Earth. So they talk to MAVEN, and MAVEN, with its big antenna, talks to us.
And MAVEN is broken.
It went into an uncontrolled tumble and stopped responding to commands. NASA effectively conceded the loss this week, and the timing is just terrible because we are in the middle of a solar conjunction.
That's when the sun is physically between Earth and Mars.
Right. It blocks all communication. So we can't see Mars, we can't send any reboot commands. So right now, the most advanced robots in human history are driving around Mars, gathering priceless data, and they have nowhere to send it. The pipeline is broken.
It feels like infrastructure everywhere is creaking this week. The Venezuelan oil rigs, the Iranian economy, the Mars data satellites.
It's entropy. Things fall apart if you don't actively maintain them. The universe trends toward chaos.
Okay, I need something positive.
Yeah.
Or at least charming. You have to tell me about Veronica.
Ah, Veronica. The Swiss brown cow. This is a study from the journal Current Biology that I absolutely loved. A small beacon of light.
The headline was something like Functional Tool Selection in Bovines, which means the cow used tools.
She did. And in a surprisingly sophisticated way. Researchers observed Veronica using specific objects in her enclosure to scratch specific itches on her body.
Like a cat using a scratching post.
More complex than that. She consistently used a rough-bristled broom when she had an itch on her thick, tough skin. But she would actively search for a specific smooth stick when she had an itch in a more sensitive area, like near her face.
So she was differentiating the tool based on the specific need of the task.
Exactly. That is functional selection. It implies causal reasoning. She understands the physical properties of the object, this is rough, this is soft, and relates them to the state of her own body. It's a higher level of cognition than we usually attribute to livestock.
It's ironic, isn't it?
How so?
We just spent 10 minutes talking about humanity spending billions of dollars and using the power of a nuclear reactor to get an AI to have agency and figure out how to use tools in a video game. And meanwhile, in a barn in Switzerland, a cow is figuring out tool use all on her own just to scratch an itch. Nature is still ahead of the code in some ways.
It really challenges our mind denial, as some philosophers call it. We have this deep-seated need to think we are the only thinkers on the planet. Veronica begs to differ.
Mind denial. I like that. Before we wrap the science section, give me the medical rapid fire. Scribe therapeutics. What's the breakthrough there?
This is a huge win for genetic medicine. They are using a technique based on epigenetics to silence the PCSK9 gene. That's the gene that tells your body how to regulate bad cholesterol.
Silence it. So they're not cutting it with CRISPR.
Correct. CRISPR, the famous gene editing tool, physically cuts the DNA strand. That's risky. It's permanent and can have off-target effects. It's like surgery. Scribe is developing a way to just turn the volume knob down on the gene without ever cutting the strand. They reduced bad cholesterol in primates by 50% with one treatment. It's a much safer, more elegant way to edit our biology.
And the HIV vaccine, I saw that was in trouble.
It was on a roller coaster. A major, promising phase 3 trial in South Africa was about to be canceled. The government funding had dried up. Then, at the 11th hour, the Gates Foundation stepped in with an emergency grant to save it.
It's fantastic news, obviously, but it's also a little scary that the fate of global public health can depend on one rich guy in Seattle writing a check.
Again, fragility. It's the theme of the week.
Let's zoom out for the final segment. Segment 5, the Global Diplomatic and Economic Monitor. Because the weirdness wasn't limited to our 3 big stories, we have to talk about Greenland.
The Greenland dispute. It feels like a rerun of 2019, doesn't it? A bit of a time warp.
President Trump wants to buy it again.
He does. But this time, the leverage he's applying is different and more serious. He's threatening to slap tariffs on key NATO allies, including Denmark, if they don't come to the table and discuss a sale.
Why are we so obsessed with Greenland? Is it just the size, the real estate?
It's 2 things. It's the massive, untapped reserves of rare earth minerals under the ice, which are critical for all modern technology. And it's the strategic location in the high north, the Arctic. As the polar ice melts, new shipping lanes and resource areas are opening up. Controlling Greenland is controlling the North Atlantic for the next century.
But Europe isn't just laughing it off this time, are they?
No. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the EU Commission, gave a blistering speech in Brussels. She called for a new independent Europe. She explicitly linked this call to the Greenland demand. She's saying, we can no longer rely on a transatlantic partner who treats our sovereign territory like a listing on Zillow.
It's even spilling over into football.
That's when you know it's a real cultural crisis in Europe. The report mentions that discussions within UEFA are getting heated about potentially excluding US-based ownership groups from European soccer leagues. When the diplomats and the soccer referees are both angry at you, you have a serious problem.
Meanwhile, as the West squabbles, China is just chugging along.
Yeah.
The economic fortress, as the report calls it.
Despite the trade wars, despite all the tariffs and sanctions, China's economy hit 5% GDP growth last year, and they posted a record $1.2 trillion trade surplus. $1 trillion.
How is that even possible? I thought the whole point of the tariffs was to cut them off.
We are cutting them off. But the world is a lot bigger than just the United States and Europe. They pivoted. They effectively stopped trying to sell as much to the West and flooded the global South with their goods. Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia. They are using their Belt and Road Initiative to build a completely separate economic sphere that simply bypasses the dollar and Western markets.
It connects back to the AI split, doesn't it? A different tech stack, a different economic loop, a different geopolitical bloc.
Exactly. We are watching the formation of two distinct operating systems for the planet.
And finally, a quick update from India.
Mixed news, as often is the case. The bad news. A nasty Nipah virus outbreak in West Bengal. It has a very high lethality rate. The WHO is on the ground. It's a sobering reminder that nature is still the ultimate and most effective bioterrorist.
The good news.
The good news is a woman named Simran Bala. She's a 26-year-old assistant commandant in the Central Reserve Police Force. Later this month, she will be the first woman in Indian history to lead an all-male contingent of the CRPF. That's their main paramilitary force in the Republic Day parade.
A woman commanding men in a major military parade? That's a huge milestone.
It is. In a week filled with dictators and drones and collapsing states, it's a small but powerful symbol of progress.
So, wow, we have covered a lot. From the stealth drones over Caracas to those dinner plate chips in the AI factories, from the burning streets of Tehran to Veronica the cow and her barn.
It's a sprawling, complicated landscape.
If we try to synthesize this, if we try to put that gyroscope back on its axis, what is the picture that emerges from this chaotic week?
I think the picture is one of fragmentation. Rapid and maybe irreversible fragmentation. We're seeing the U.S. acting unilaterally with immense force in its traditional sphere of influence, Venezuela, and in the Middle East. It is ignoring international consensus to pursue hard, tangible interests like oil. And at the very same time, we are seeing this technological decoupling with AI, creating two fundamentally different ways of thinking about the future of intelligence and work.
It really feels that the world is breaking up into distinct competing blocks.
It is. The interconnected, globalized world that we, thought we lived in for the last 30 years, I think this week shows us that it's gone. You now have a U.S.-centric sphere, a China-centric sphere, and a lot of chaos in the margins where those two tectonic plates are grinding against each other.
And for you, listening at home, why does this matter? Beyond just being interesting, if terrifying, cocktail party trivia.
It matters because stability is fragile. That is the final thought I want to leave people with today.
A fragility of stability.
Think about what we just discussed. In 1 week, just 7 days, we saw a head of state physically extracted from his country by foreign commandos. We saw AI agents demonstrate in a public forum that they are ready to replace a huge swath of human workers. We saw the global internet fracturing into two camps. We saw our literal foothold in space breaking down.
These were things that were basically science fiction, or the stuff of spy novels 10 years ago.
And now they are the Tuesday news. We all operate under a set of basic assumptions. That tomorrow will look more or less like today. That our jobs are safe, that our borders are respected, that our money has value. The events in Venezuela and Iran, and perhaps most importantly in the labs in Silicon Valley and Beijing, show that those assumptions can vanish overnight.
That is a sobering thought. But I suppose it's why we do this deep dive every week, to try and understand the machinery behind the chaos.
Absolutely. And if I had to give one piece of advice to everyone listening, watch the inference war. Don't get distracted by the daily political drama. Watch who wins the chip war, because whoever owns the infrastructure of future thought will eventually own everything else.
We will be watching, and we'll be here next week to break it down. Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. Stay safe out there.
Stay curious.